If the coronavirus has taught us anything, it is that America has become dependent on China to a degree that is uncomfortable at best and dangerous at worst. How much do we really know about this giant on the other side of the world? How big a threat does it pose going forward? And how is our relationship with the Chinese likely to change in the post-COVID world? I'm Tim Donner with 5 facts about China. Fact 1. China has the largest population in the world, with almost 1.4 billion inhabitants, slightly more than India. China's population is approximately 4 times larger than the U.S., even though its landmass is almost the same. No less than 100 cities in China have a population of 1 million or more, with 6 cities at 10 million or more, foremost among them Shanghai, the nation's center of commerce at more than 23 million, and the capital Beijing at over 18 million. In contrast, the largest American city, New York, has a population of just 8 million. Fact 2. China's economy has transformed dramatically in the last 30 years. Impoverished for more than a generation by a centrally planned economy, China has now become the world's largest manufacturing economy and exporter of goods, the world's fastest growing consumer market, and second largest importer of goods. On the other hand, while Americans frequently discuss the preponderance of their consumer goods made in China, these are primarily cheaper items and actually account for only 3% of total U.S. personal spending. For small items like food, clothes, and gas, 76% of Americans' personal spending goes to goods made in the U.S. and 6% to goods made in China. President Trump has made a new trade deal with China a major priority of his administration, seeking a reduction in our trade deficit with the Chinese, more equitable tariffs, and a halt to the theft of intellectual property such as patents and copyrights. Phase 1 of that deal was completed in 2019. Fact 3. China has produced a shockingly high percentage of drugs used by Americans. A Department of Commerce study in 2019 found that 97% of all antibiotics in the U.S. came from China. Some 80% of the active ingredients used to make pharmaceuticals in the U.S. are estimated to come from China and other developing countries like India. Now, this creates a dependency on foreign countries for vital medical supplies that is almost certain to change in the post-corona world. Fact 4. For all its economic growth, China has been ruled by communists for 70 years. China has effectively birthed a new model of government, economic freedom combined with political repression. In 1946, one of the world's ancient empires was forever changed by a 3-year-long communist revolution led by Mao Zedong, which immediately followed a second war against their longtime enemy, Japan. When the communists took control in 1949, the Chinese people were largely isolated from the world, and tens of millions died under a regime widely viewed as brutal and murderous. But following the death of Mao in 1976, China began to significantly loosen economic restrictions and allowed private economic activity for the first time, while continuing to deny political freedoms ordinarily associated with growing economies, such as free and fair elections. In fact, in 2018, all term limits on the presidency of China were removed, leaving the current President Xi Jinping as effectively president for life. And that brings us to fact 5. Hong Kong represents a special challenge for the Chinese rulers. This small but most densely populated region of China has long been a bastion of capitalism. And since its handover from Britain back to China following the Brits' 100-year lease of the territory, tensions have run increasingly high, culminating with massive protests in 2019 over the growing restrictions imposed on Hong Kong by the Chinese central government. As a special administrative region, Hong Kong maintains separate governing and economic systems from that of mainland China under a principle of one country, two systems. But the world is paying close attention to just how hard and how successfully the communist government in Beijing will crack down on its most threatening provincial revolt. No doubt the relationship between China and the U.S., as well as the rest of the world, will never be the same following a virus emanating from China, which shut down the entire world for the first time in history, and the widespread belief that the Chinese government spread false information about how it all happened and how they responded. And given China's increasingly prominent economic position, whatever changes come about will produce a potentially major rebalancing of the world economy and perhaps even a new world order.